Now, going to Naomi Wolf, her bio is lengthy. She is a best-selling author of multiple books, and she is our guest today. Naomi, instead of, myself going through for 10 minutes your bio, tell folks a little bit about yourself, and then I want to recap the 10 steps towards fascism that you cover in your new book, The End of America, and then get into some of the other issues we didn't discuss when you were on with us 2 weeks ago.
Sure. Thank you so much, Alex. Well, I'm the mother of 2, and let's see, I got a BA from Yale, a graduate degree, or I'm sorry, not a degree, graduate studies at Oxford. I was a Rhodes Scholar. I did write 6 books. Luckily, some of them have been international bestsellers. That's really happy. And usually I write about gender issues, but the emergency we're in called me to write the most recent book about the crisis facing us as there's this intense subversion of democracy. And what I saw as echoes from history, from mid and early 20th century totalitarian and fascist history, to put in place the same 10 steps that would-be dictators always use to close down a democracy. So that's briefly who I am.
Now, last time we only got through about 9 of them. We had to hurry because I was always adding comments, and so were you. Run through. You got the floor. The 10 steps, and then I want to get into the Bush-Nazi connection, your questions about the 9/11 official story, and the whole left-right paradigm. But first, the 10 steps, what your book covers.
Sure. And can I just say, Alex, I'm pleased to be talking with you again, because apparently I got in trouble for talking with you last time. And I really believe in a democracy. There should be nothing, no questions that citizens have that are off limits. So, yeah.
What do you mean you got in trouble?
Well, I did some right-wing radio, which again I'm happy to do because I'm eager to reach out to people across the political spectrum. I think that's what democracy is about. And a couple of very prominent right-wing radio hosts yelled at me for talking to you, because that's supposed to be sort of beyond the pale. So I'm delighted to be talking to you again.
Was one of them Lord Medved?
Yes, Michael Medved yelled at me. Yeah, but
the guy that publicly goes to the White House and publicly is videotaped and photographed getting marching orders from Bush. You mean that guy?
Well, I don't know about that, but all I know.
Oh yeah, that was in the New York Times. Remember last year?
Right.
They went and all the neocon hosts. But go ahead. I mean, what did he say to you? I got an email about it, but I didn't hear it.
Oh, I don't want to sort of get into sort of mudslinging, but I guess his position is that some of what you believe is sort of at the far reaches of sort of conventional discourse.
Oh, he has said that I'm treasonous. Yes, yeah.
Oh, really? Treason? He's throwing the treason word around at you? Well, that's step number 8. I'm sorry to hear that. But anyway, I strongly believe, and I'll say it again, that in a democracy, there are no questions citizens have that are off limits. There's no conversation that should be off limits. We've got the First Amendment, and that, I personally believe people should talk across all kinds of party lines and belief systems to enrich our discussion. So I'm delighted to be talking to you in your community. Ha, ha, ha.
well, I'm delighted, too. So.
Thank you. So shall I go through the 10 steps?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we had a fantastic conversation last time, and I'm so happy to be taking it up again. So the first step, as we mentioned, is that all would-be dictators. And again, I looked at Germany in the 30s, Russia in the 30s, Italy in the 20s, East Germany in the 50s, Czechoslovakia in the 60s, Pinochet's coup in Chile in 73, and China's crackdown against democracy in the late 80s. So the first step everyone takes is to invoke a terrifying internal and external threat, and often it's a real threat that the would-be dictator will hype or manipulate. The second thing all would-be dictators do is to create a secret or unaccountable prison system outside the rule of law where torture takes place. And often they'll create military commission systems that strip prisoners of due process. The third thing they always do is to develop a paramilitary force that is not answerable to the people. And this is very effective because they send that tactically to kind of intimidate the population, even when they're still a democratic civil society. The fourth thing they do is they create a surveillance apparatus aimed at ordinary citizens and let ordinary citizens know that there's a surveillance apparatus aimed at them. The fifth thing they do is they infiltrate and harass citizens' groups, and we've got multiple lawsuits. I'm sure your listeners are thinking, okay, Blackwater, okay, the black sites in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib, okay, they're filling in all the details as I go through this with contemporary events. The sixth thing they do is target key individuals. I was just saying the ACLU has multiple lawsuits because agents of the state are infiltrating so many, benign civilian groups, anti-war groups, environmental groups, and so on. So they'll target key individuals, and that means people like Dan Rather, who lost his job when he ran a report critical of Bush, people like Bill Maher, who lost his job when he said something, the Dixie Chicks, who had these orchestrated burnings of their CDs and their careers were at stake. And then, the targeting goes from smears and professional repercussions to, arrests and investigations. We're seeing this politician in Alabama got railroaded. We're seeing, investigations of, tax investigations of people like the NAACP who have been critical of the Bush administration. And then it gets worse as we get through what becomes possible in later steps. But let's see. The eighth thing they do is that they restrict the press, and we're seeing more and more attacks, harassment of journalists in the United States. Greg Palast, who wrote Armed Madhouse, was investigated by Homeland Security. Bill Keller, when he ran the Swift banking stories, faced calls of treason, just as you did, Alex, and also calls to be tried under the Espionage Act, which has given people in our nation's history 10-year sentences for giving speeches about the First Amendment and closed down dissent for a decade. Let's see, the ninth thing that happens, you just mentioned it, is that criticism gets recast as treason and dissent as espionage, and that's when you start to see things like, and this is right out of Hitler's playbook and Stalin's playbook, you start to see things like, let's see, it's called H.R. 1959, the bill that passed by 404 to a handful out of the House and is now going to the Senate, which would basically criminalize conversations like this. It would criminalize thought. It would criminalize, a blog I wrote yesterday saying that we should appoint a special prosecutor to investigate what happened to the missing CIA tapes. When that law passes, God forbid, it'll in a way be over because any of us can be kind of rounded up and arrested and face a great deal of difficulty for thinking things or saying things, which is a hallmark of a closing society, what I call a fascist shift. The last step is to make it easier to declare martial law and to subvert the rule of law. And there are a number of ways to sort of close things down with the final step. You don't always need a march on Rome like in Italy in 1920 or Night of the Long Knives. Hitler's sort of purge of this inner circle, which was very bloody and dramatic. You can do it through things like purging the civil service, like they tried to do with trying to fire all of the U.S. attorneys at once, which the hidden and erased emails that are being subpoenaed would indicate that they wanted to do. Goebbels did this in 1933, because then you can have an election, but, if all your guys are deciding the outcome or deciding who to prosecute in terms of voter registration, the outcome is foreordained. Or you can deploy Blackwater, for instance, who now has a presence in Illinois and is trying to build a presence in San Diego to monitor the border. Or you can federalize the National Guard, which the Defense Authorization Act of 2007 essentially did, giving the president alone the power to declare martial law and send the National Guard of one state out to subdue the citizens of another state without the consent of the governors of either state and tell Congress about it after the fact. So we are in a terrible crisis because all these 10 steps are in place now.
Absolutely, and I would say from my knowledge of those 10 steps that you're even, erring on the side of caution. And as bad as what you talked about sounds, it's actually much worse. On the martial law front, Presidential Decision Directive 51, Bush says he is above Congress and is supreme dictator. All of these memos have been coming out where they say the president decides what is constitutional, that all law flows from his mouth, the Führer precept, and all of this is staying in place. And that brings us to the other issue. Naomi, you specifically advised the Clinton White House.
No, I didn't advise the Clinton White House.
Well, I mean, specifically, what did you do in the Clinton White House?